Greetings, Race community. Brent coming in live with today's guest, Steve Rosfeld, who serves as Vice President for Development at the University of Cincinnati Foundation. And Steve and I haven't seen each other in about a week. Welcome, Steve.
Brent, it's been too long, my friend. Good to see you, and thanks so much for the invitation. It's great to be with you.
Well, speaking of invitations, the University of Cincinnati was recently invited to join the Big 12 Athletic Conference. They have joined the Big 12, and Steve and I had the opportunity to connect with many of our friends in the sector at the Big 12 Development Conference in Lawrence, Kansas last week. The KU team did an amazing job hosting, and it was a lot of fun to see you, Steve, and your team.
They really did, Brennan. It was great to see you and your team, and kudos to the KU endowment team for hosting such an incredible conference. As you said, we're making new friends in the Big 12 at the University of Cincinnati Foundation, and just want to say hello and thank you for many of our Big 12 colleagues who are being so welcoming to us Bearcats here in Cincinnati. People like Blair, Atkinson, and Scott Roberts at Oklahoma State. Greg and Stephanie at K-State, and Cindy at West Virginia, for instance, just to name a few, have been over the top welcoming to us Bearcats. So just want to say thank you for hosting us, KU team, and everyone else in the Big 12 that's really opened their arms to the Bearcats. We're looking forward to being a part of that great group.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Steve, and I'm confident their fans will be far less welcoming. So we'll balance that. But let's talk. Steve, we've known each other over the years, but have mostly spent time kind of focused on the present and the future. And so I look forward to learning a little bit more about your history and what led you to this space. And as I've been asking recent guests, I want to go back to your own college decision, which certainly is deeply rooted in what you're doing today. So take me back to Archbishop Moeller, junior year. Who was that guy? What was he into? And what led you to the University of Cincinnati?
Wow. Going back in time a little bit there, Brent, it's fun to think about.
We were listening. Nickelback, Green Day. It was an epic time. Creed. Big moment there for sure.
Late 90s was a special time for a lot of us.
Third Eye Blind. Let's go.
Yeah. So junior year at Moeller High School in Cincinnati, I was getting ready to launch my my short-lived political career. I was getting ready to run as senior class presidents the year after that, and really fell in love with leadership. Fell in love with really serving a mission that you really are passionate about. And Moeller High School was a tremendous place for me and our family, really, and learned a lot. Played basketball at Moeller High School, learned probably as many life lessons on the court as anything, really, in my life. And Moeller High School really helped to shape me. So I had really one school in terms of.
Just wait, you got to tell me about the campaign strategy. Tell me about the political career.
Shook a lot of hands, did a lot of door-to-door, grassroots campaigning. Honestly, I was standing outside of the beginning of class for probably 2 or 3 weeks at the beginning of that term, just shaking hands. And I don't think there were any babies to kiss necessarily, but I was shaking a lot of hands and really was pressing forward with a vision to really make the student body and the student experience tremendous. And we had a great team and a great group of guys there.
I walked through my kid's school the other day, and it's a K-12 school. All of the students are in the same building, and it was right at the end of the school year, and all of the campaign posters were up for the incoming class leadership election. And I will say, for all of the advances in technology, now we're talking AI. It does not appear to have really changed campaign strategy or execution in the high school context just yet. It was pretty much what you described.
Well, and maybe we can talk more about this, but still, going back 20 something years ago and still today, face-to-face contact there's nothing like it, right? In terms of building relationships. And that's what we were trying to do once upon a time. But really, that school still means a lot to me and our family. I grew up across the street from my grade school, All Saints School in Cincinnati, and Moeller High School was right next to it. So I had about 12 years of walking across the street to those two schools, and it just those communities still are really special places with a lot of special people, and our family still to this day is really connected to those communities. So it
Love
really,
that.
yeah, and really speaks to our commitment to Cincinnati. I've been here in Cincinnati. I think I'm fifth generation. Our daughter is now sixth generation Cincinnati. So we're pretty committed to this place. And we can certainly talk more about that and how and why I've chosen to be at the University of Cincinnati for so long. But it
Well,
really
look,
does.
we see, there tend to be kind of two extremes in the sector, which maybe aren't extremes because they tend to be somewhat common. You're either like advancement journeyman, where you are, going school to school around the country. We've had people that have done international stints. They've canvassed the entire country, and then, once in a while you meet somebody that really is able to plant roots and grow. And one of the big challenges is, how do you both stay committed to a place and an institution, but also advance your career, which, sometimes can be at odds with each other. You've obviously been able to navigate that, and I want to learn more about it. But first, I want to know about your undergraduate experience at Cincinnati. What stood out? And it sounds like, from what I can tell, there was maybe just a second glimmer of political interest and aspiration coming out of it.
Well, with a family of athletes, I like to say I was focused on my academics at the University of Cincinnati. My brother played football for the Bearcats. My sister was heavily involved in athletics at Cincinnati. I still do have an uncle that played baseball for the Bearcats. So we are a Bearcat family, and I've been a sports fan and a Bearcats fan for a very, very long time. So really, I did look at other schools, but I really had one choice, and that was to stay in town and stay in the community that I love so much. And as you said, went to the University of Cincinnati as an undergrad. I have a liberal arts background. Communication and political science was an interesting synergy for me. We had a faculty member who was world class in political rhetoric, and I just fell in love with how communication and rhetoric really helped to launch political careers, launch presidents in certain times, and really fell in love with that very niche specialty in that program. And as you said, I was involved in national, state, and local politics. I had the honor of being in Washington early 2000s as a White House intern, and served there for a good amount of time, and really fell in love with it. But as you know, Brent, sometimes life throws you curveballs, and priorities change. And for a lot of reasons, I wanted to get back to Cincinnati. I was on that path to be the Washingtonian, if you will, in that political space. But for a lot of reasons, I wanted to come home and wanted to be with family, and chose to come back to the alma mater after an invigorating political career that was short, but really did help train me for what I do now today, and really have helped to position me for success in this advancement industry. But working on a presidential campaign, working on state and local campaigns is for a lot of us, really great training grounds in advancement.
I don't think, in the 150 guests that we've hosted, that I've had any White House alumni, former interns in this role. What was that like? Like, what are the highlights? That's got to be kind of a surreal first day on the job when you think of the spectrum of first days that one could have.
Do you know, Brent? They had those fantasy baseball camps where you can go spend time in spring training with the legends, with all these baseball clubs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's a surreal experience for those individuals who choose to do that. It was kind of my experience in Washington for the months I was there. It was surreal to see the President of the United States up close in action, all the secretaries and the cabinet officials. It was kind of a fantasy world, really.
But even like, there's a lot of interns in Washington, D.C., and on the hierarchy of like what the internship is, I mean, there's a big spectrum. Like, you got to be at the White House. That's kind of
it was.
I mean, that had to be a lot of street cred with the other interns running around town, right?
Yeah, it was. It was. I mean, it was a true honor. We were doing really important work, for the president when he was out traveling. We would ensure that, the people he was working with were upstanding citizens of the United States, and saying the right things and doing the right things, representing, our country well. And we did our best to ensure that the president and his team was in good position. to do just that. So it was good work. It led to an opportunity to work on the campaign in 2004, and just invigorating and a real honor and service to the country. So I was honored to be a part of that, and I really did see it as service, in many ways. Just like over 20 years at the University of Cincinnati
Right.
in this field service to the community. So
Well,
it was really special.
after that experience, as you mentioned, it led you back to Cincinnati, and pretty shortly thereafter, getting connected with an opportunity at the Alumni Association, which I don't know if that was a part of the foundation at that time, but just give me a sense of obviously deep Bearcats affinity and connections through the family, but a lot of people have deep, multi-generational connections to the university, but don't go and pursue entry-level roles or opportunities like you did. So who connected you? And when you took that first role, did you have a feeling that this might be your career path, or was it not maybe as profound?
Well, Brent, I appreciate that question. I think I'm a big believer in being growth minded, right? And learning from mistakes, learning from failures, learning from things that just didn't work out too well. And my last political job was running a mayoral campaign here in Cincinnati. And we really didn't have a good chance to win for a lot of reasons, but we were pretty proud about that campaign, but it was time to move on. It was time to pivot to a different field. And, I had some line of sight on advancement. I was an intern. I was the UC Foundation's first intern a long time ago as an undergrad. And I had some good line of sight on what, the value of the industry, but really had an opportunity to apply and interview for an alumni relations role. I did show some of that grit and determination, because after several weeks of not hearing back, I decided just to go there myself into the HR department, and I shook some hands there, and I stopped by the Alumni Association offices and introduced myself to a few people, including the person that hired me. And that person now is a colleague and a peer and a great friend, and that's Jen Heisey, who is the vice president for alumni engagement here at the University of Cincinnati and the UC Alumni Association. And she's a leader in this industry. Many of you listening or watching probably know that name. But she hired me. She took a chance on me, and it really worked out.
Can I just ask, showing up, bold strategy, sounds like it paid off. If Jen were on this podcast right now, what's her version of that story? We liked the initiative, or what's this guy doing here? Wait, what?
She comments frequently that she appreciated the determination of showing up and asking for help and asking for what you want to see happen, right? And I guess that's the salesman in me. Perhaps that was ingrained by my father, who spent 35 years selling at Procter and Gamble. I don't know, but it was a reflection of how deadly serious I was of being a part of the University of Cincinnati and Bearcat community. I think she appreciated it. Hopefully it wasn't too annoying, but it's a good lesson for all of our colleagues, is to, show up, ask for help, be very specific, and seek out people that could have some influence on your life. And looking back, me showing up like that and asking for help was an important inflection point in my life and my career. Ironically, Brent, just a quick story. When I was still trying to decide what to do when I grew up early on in my career, I applied for, a political position that was going to be out of Columbus. So I drove up there and had an interview. It was going to be working with a certain senator at that time. And, one of the last questions of the interview was, "What don't you like to do?" And my answer, without hesitating, was, "I don't like to fundraise." And I could tell that was the wrong answer. It was the honest answer, but it was the wrong answer. And at that time, political fundraising, I'm not sure how it is now, but necessarily. But back then, it was very transactional. I was hustling around town collecting checks, and it just wasn't fulfilling for me. And I gave an honest answer, and I bring that up because A, it's pretty ironic knowing what I do now, but B, really is certain inflection points in your life. If that conversation went differently, what could have been, right? Or if I answered that question not in an honest way, what could have been my path? But nevertheless, I'm glad I answered it the way I did. It led me to really be hyper focused on higher education, specifically University of Cincinnati, and close to 20 years later, it's been just a perfect synergy of doing what I love, serving a mission that I love, and making the impact that I think a lot of us care deeply about.
And so at that time, that's a great story, and it is definitely ironic. We'll come back to it. You're working with Jen, specifically with the Alumni Association. Was it a part of the foundation at that time, or was it distinct?
We were a separate 501c3.
Yeah.
For 100 plus years, that organization existed as a separate entity. And that changed 5 or 6 years ago. We had a president at the time at the university, now running University of Michigan, Santa Ona, who had a bold vision to bring together our foundation, our alumni association, and the UC Health Foundation all under one umbrella organization. And that's how we exist now. But back then, we were a separate entity with a lot of autonomy.
And there's certainly been a wave of merger and integration, and you all were in the early, I think, part of that wave. It's continued to play out around the country, but I think maybe part of the reason that wave has played out is somewhat reflected in a role that you held at the Alumni Association, which is, in spite of not loving transactional fundraising, you took a role as director of development, where you then were fundraising on behalf of the Alumni Association, which might be one of the most confusing fundraising pitches in the industry. Where, I mean, you am I right? Am I wrong? Like, I just think part of what you were trying to do is part of why we've seen the merger and integration to create a simpler story to constituents.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, going back to that point, it was a difficult pitch. It allowed me to really hone my message and become really disciplined with the impact that donors could make, because we had to tell that story specifically. So we talked about scholarship programs going to legacy families to the University of Cincinnati with a lot of details and a lot of precision. We had to hone in on that message because it was a tougher sell. We went from a very strong membership model that existed for a very long time to a philanthropic model that allowed us to be successful, in raising funds for scholarship, for, like I said, for those families. We also raised funds for facilities to help, increase the alumni engagement experience. And our alumni house was renovated in many ways because of that work. But, asking for money in terms of building out a robust homecoming parade, for instance, was a tough sell, but we worked it through, and we grinded, and we had a lot of great conversations that led to the operating budgets increasing significantly, the endowment respective to that organization increasing significantly, and looking back, I'm glad I did that work. It was difficult, but again, through the thread of being growth minded, it allowed me to hone a message, to be crystal clear on the impact donors could make, and to really talk about that vision with a lot of energy and a lot of passion. And certainly, and as you know, Brent, in alumni engagement, you have to have that. You have to be authentic. You have to understand the value of your given institution, and talk about it with a lot of gusto. And I think we did that. And I'm proud about that work. But it really did, again, back to inflection points professionally. The political experience helped me. That experience very specifically helped me. And both those two instances led me to a really exciting role at the Lindner College of Business at the University of Cincinnati that really helped launch me into the development field in higher education.
Did it ever feel competitive with other fundraisers around the university? Like, was there ever a dynamic of you're talking to the same family that somebody from the College of Business is talking to? How did you coordinate that? And maybe that tension still exists. Maybe it's always a part of development, but that structure maybe might have made it a little bit more inherently competitive.
No doubt. And you could look at it that way and kind of dig in, or you could, flip the script and really build the internal relationships that you need to make it more of a collaborative conversation than competitive conversation. And that's really the approach that I took. Brent, you've worked with a lot of people over the years. There's two different ways of going at a very collaborative type of role, and that is to flex your muscles and dig in and go at it with your head down, or really elevate up and build internal relationships in a way that builds trust and builds a good collaborative spirit. And that's what I did then. And I think it's an absolute critical point for our colleagues throughout the country is, regardless of the type of role you're in development, those internal partnerships are as important as those external stakeholders you're engaging. If it's a faculty member, if it's a clinician, if it's a development colleague, if you're operating as an independent contractor in this business, it's not going to go well, So really, again, to your point, Brent, it allowed me as a professional to really quickly understand how important those relationships were, so that I can sit down not only with the donor and articulate the value of our alumni association, but really sit down and bring colleagues on board so that we can amplify giving in a way. My first significant gift, our first significant gift from a major gift perspective for the Alumni Association was a blended gift, and it was a gift to two colleges, and it was a gift to the UC Alumni Association. And I'm convinced back then, now how many years ago, 15, 17 years ago, whatever it was, that if we would have parceled that out, the gift would have been smaller, just very practically. But our effort to bring three colleagues together, talk about what a collaborative vision could be, really did help to elevate and amplify that gift. That was my first gift at that six-figure level of my career. And I still remember that.
And then that led you to join the business school, which I imagine very, to the point of honing a message, a more well-defined constituency, right? Alumni association. One of the challenges that I see with most alumni associations is they literally have to be all things to all people. We have to serve the youngest and the oldest and the closest and the most, far away, and try to be welcoming to everybody. Whereas when you're in a development role in a specific college, like the business school, specific constituency, you can be probably inherently more focused. The top employers of the business school, just to give context: Fifth Third Bank, Procter and Gamble, Fidelity, Kroger, Amazon, GE, et cetera. So what was how did you're still selling the University of Cincinnati, but in a much more focused way? How did your script change? I mean, what was that experience? And you spent quite a period of time with the business school, so my guess is it went quite well.
Yeah, it did, Brent. I had the pleasure of having, a great boss at the time that gave me cover, gave me focus, allowed me to jump into the portfolio for a couple of years and really build it out. I was at home because, like I said, I didn't have a business degree, but the competitive nature of a business school is a healthy thing and is a good thing oftentimes. In other words, the alumni are hyper engaged with the universities that they serve oftentimes throughout the country. That certainly was the case here at UC. So business school alumni are really engaged, which is great. The faculty are really smart, incredible people who are driven, who are working really hard. And just the people in that atmosphere, I found to be driven and in a healthy way, very competitive. So I felt at home. That's kind of who I am as well. So I thrived in that environment, especially, like I said, with the amount of cover that I had as a junior member of the team, focusing on fundraising. So we had a very clear vision at the time. Luckily for us, we had a new dean that was coming in, David Szymanski, that came in and really helped to shape a vision of growth and of impact in very measurable ways. The dial moved very quickly. I still point back to the ingredients of fundraising success back to my early days at the business school, and still to this day I point to three really special ingredients to boil all of this down. If it's an academic program, if it's an athletic department, or if it's an entire university, if you have vision that's inspirational, cogent, and clear, that's a really good ingredient for success. Secondly, if you have momentum, if you have results behind that vision, if you have a growth pattern that is compelling and inspiring, that's a really good special ingredient for success. And if you have urgency, to jump in and it's it answers the why yes, why now question very clearly. If you can do that, if you can have those three things all moving in the same direction, you're going to raise a lot of money. Again, no matter what scale and scope you're looking at. So back in my early days of fundraising in higher education for that business school, that's what we had. They still have it now, but that's what we were building together. And just so appreciative of that opportunity. It really did, again, one of those inflection points professionally that helped me and still does help me be successful in this work.
Love that, Steve. Vision, momentum, and urgency makes sense. When you think about those years, it had to be a fair amount of time on the road, recognizing that there's a strong concentration in Ohio, but you've got alumni all over the place as well. Any trips stand out as going extremely well, or maybe even better, extremely poorly? Any just great trips or
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't know what this says about me, but I learn a lot from when things don't go well. And, I go back, we had a tremendous amount of visits and initiatives throughout the country, as you said, Brent, but the one that really sticks out as you asked that question was a moment in time up in New York City, where we were sitting with somebody who had been disengaged, to put it very charitably, for 35, 40 years. But this person was incredibly successful. And we were sitting in his corner office on Fifth Avenue, and we knew precisely that this person was charitable, was philanthropic, was building schools in the 5 boroughs, for instance, was really deadly serious, if you will, about ensuring that poverty was addressed in New York City, for instance. And we knew that. And I went in with a very narrow lens. I was trying to get this person who was 35 years removed from the University of Cincinnati to think that we were the best school in the world, that we were the best MBA program in the world. And it was just not there. It was not clicking. And yet we still, wanted to drive the conversation toward what the business school was doing to make an impact. And it took a long time. It probably took us 3 to 4 years to get that person to make a gift to the University of Cincinnati for the business school. So on one side of the coin, the team did relatively well after I got out of the way to get a gift to the business school for scholarship. So applause to the team for that. On the other hand, I think a lot about what we could have done if we went into that conversation with a much wider lens. And I know they back then they trained us and they provided us a lot of incentives to collaborate, but I was so focused on B school that it really missed an opportunity. So instead of going into that conversation talking about food insecurity initiatives at the University of Cincinnati, talking about the community impact the University of Cincinnati makes on Cincinnati public schools or certain communities in Cincinnati, I came in very narrowed, and it was a struggle to get a very modest gift, and I think it was a key lesson for me and for us to say, look, we have to be connected to the passions of our donors. We have to be better as a team and as individuals to have fluency in other areas so that we can speak very fluently on various programs throughout a very complex institution like the University of Cincinnati, so that it doesn't take 3 or 4 years to get that first test gift. It could be much, much sooner than that if we're interconnected to donor passions much more. So it really that story has shaped our strategy even to this day. We can talk more about that. But that was a key learning for me early on in my career.
Well, tell me more about, let me put you on the spot a little bit. knowing what you know now, if you were to walk into that donor's office, how would you frame the first 30 seconds, first 45 seconds of the conversation if you had a second chance to make a first impression?
I would dig deeper into why this person was investing in the initiatives that he was in the 5 boroughs, and inherently understand his motivations and his inspiration, and then quickly look to connect that motivation and that inspiration to a certain priority at the University of Cincinnati.
Right. So really just flip it, instead of feeling like you needed to lead with why us, why we're great, really focus on deep understanding of what they've done. It also shows the research and the the commitment you've done to walking in prepared. And then I guess part of it is how do you muster a genuine interest in the philanthropy that they've done elsewhere, as opposed to sort of leading them in that direction to hopefully, pull them back your way. Like how do you genuinely bring that interest to the discovery conversation when you've done it hundreds of thousands of times, which I guess is part of what just makes somebody a good fit or not for the sector. You got to genuinely enjoy hearing somebody's story. And if you feel like you have to fake it or go through the motions or go through the process just to get to the point that you can redirect the interest to something that you're working on and make the ask, it's probably not going to work out in the long term.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I think, this story has fueled our strategy, and obviously I think our team strategy of having broader fluency in other areas is also inspired by this donor investor mindset that is becoming more and more prevalent. So in other words, my hypothesis, I think a lot of people feel like this perhaps, but my hypothesis is that giving is going to be much more fueled on passions than affinity, right? So I have a degree on my wall behind me, which is great. I love my degree. I'm proud of it, but it's not necessarily going to be the reason why I invest in certain programs. So I think we're going to have to adapt. I think we already are, but we're going to have to get very serious about adapting to more of the donor investor mindset. So relying less on, the degree, relying less on going into that meeting, ready to talk about accounting, for instance, although we all love accounting. It may not be about that for that given individual. We have to be open and ready to be fluid, to be adaptable, to go in with a plan that takes us out of our comfort zone. So for us at the University of Cincinnati, we've started to build, vision and structures and strategies around enterprise-wide institutional priorities, so that in the near future, when that business school fundraiser is in that corner office, they can talk about accounting. They can talk about, the MBA program. They can talk about their college as experts, and they also can talk about inclusive philanthropy, innovation and research, student success, very broadly. Those 3 areas are what we're building a lot of emphasis around, so that we can shorten the cultivation and solicitation cycle. We can elevate giving and amplify giving because of the cross-functional dynamics of these mega gifts that are happening across the country. But really, we're also doing the right thing. We're also meeting where our donors are rather than waiting for them to come to us. So we're really excited about it. We have some work to do. At the University of Cincinnati, we have 14 colleges or so that we support, and that's going to continue to be the case. But we have to be more adaptable and more fluent on broader initiatives at the University of Cincinnati. And, we're building toward that, and we're pretty excited about it.
Steve, I just hosted Greg Willems on the podcast, and Greg was sharing, he's had some pretty interesting stops on his career journey. And he was pretty upfront about the fact that, once in a while the recruiter calls and it's an interesting pitch, and, you pick up the phone and hear him out. And that led to a couple of his positions, including one in Hawaii, of all places. But without a doubt, during your time, now we're talking through, 2018, let's say, at the business school, you're getting those calls, you're getting those emails, you're seeing people at conferences. but you're sticking with the university. And, at the same time, there's 14 schools and units, and there's other executive directors of development that maybe want, to aspire for different roles at the university. You ultimately were able to step into the VP of development role. But how do you think, how did you think about that commitment to the town and the university specifically, when I'm sure you've been getting those recruiter calls over the year? And how do you balance wanting to be a great team player with also wanting to compete for more leadership opportunities, to aspire to, to lead, which you said, maybe started back at Archbishop Mueller?
Yeah, I think it goes back to an early lesson, my folks provided to us as kids, and that is to simply think about your priorities and to ensure that your life and your career is aligned to those priorities. So going back a long time, I had a priority of serving a mission that I cared deeply about. Number one. Number two, I valued and I had a priority of ensuring that I was growing and I was making an impact. And thirdly, I guess, as a priority, I wanted to ensure that, I was working with incredible people and having fun doing it. Right. We work really hard in this business, but if you're not having fun with the people you're working with, then you're not, for me at least, I'm not as fulfilled as I could be. So, over 17 years professionally, if you count my student days as an intern, over 20 years, those priorities have meshed in this organization. I will also say it's important to have new experiences, even if you have a strong tenure at a given institution. It's not like I've been doing the same job for 17 years. I've had 3 or 4 jobs that are materially different from each other. And that has helped me provide a sense of invigoration that's helped to give me growth in new ways. So it's not just a linear path over 20 years. It's been different roles in different spaces and engaging with a very broad, diverse set of stakeholders, which has helped me find this really interesting, compelling synergy. Right, I'm doing what I love to do. I'm passionate about higher education. I'm passionate about the nonprofit space, advancement specifically. I'm passionate in the tactical work of helping to provide vision to a certain community, helping to build legacies, family legacies that are real. And I'm doing it with incredible people. And that has all just come together here at the University of Cincinnati. So we'll see what the future brings. I love this. I love this town. I love this university. I love the people we work with, and I hope that it continues for a very long time.
Steve, you were an athlete. You talked about the Bearcat athletes connection over the years through your family. We reconnected at the Big 12 Development Conference last week. And I know that you have been really at the forefront of understanding and navigating the intersection of name, image, likeness, the changing landscape of higher education and athletics, the shifting of conferences, and you all joining the Big 12 is a part of that. And then the intersection of all of that work with fundraising and affinity. And it's May 30th of 2023 as we record this. And so it's such a fast changing space that no matter what you tell me in the next few minutes, it will maybe appear obsolete a year from now, just because there's so many unknowns. But knowing what you know right now, what should people understand? Like, what are the elevator sort of summary cliff notes on NIL, the intersection with advancement, and any predictions for where this heads?
Is this on the record? I guess it is, Brent.
Totally on the record. Unless you say something you really regret, our producer Lillian has a way with the situations.
Lillian is our safety net. Great. No, so you're absolutely right. Collegiate athletics is in a time of incredible change. It's not hyperbolic to say that real transformation is happening right now between conference alignment and realignment and power conference consolidation that's really happening, and the transfer portal and NIL. Incredible change over the last couple of years. The big bang moment in terms of creating a new universe was name, image, and likeness. I will say that every state and every institution has to make their own decisions on what's best for them. Obviously, there's 35, 40 states with some guardrails, some laws, some legislation that gives some clarity. State of Ohio has that as well. So we have some parameters there. We also have some parameters, with the fact that this is really important. It's really important to provide a very positive, fulfilling experience to our student athletes. Very positive. We need to provide everything we can as an organization, as a team, to provide a meaningful experiences to our donors and our investors in this space, but also do it in a very appropriate way. And I think that, to John Cunningham's credit and our leadership of the university's credit, we've been able to strike that very good balance. This is a very urgent, critical priority, and a great opportunity for our student athletes. And we have been working as an organization appropriately to help. Where this is going, I don't really know. I think there's reason to think that the NIL space will continue to expand. There's a lot of discussions around, potential new arrangements around, revenue and revenue sharing opportunities for student athletes that I find very compelling. But through all of that, what we talk about to our team is that philanthropy is still the anchor. Philanthropy is still the driver of real transformation in people's lives. The data point that I continue to think about and reflect on is the fact that, at the University of Cincinnati, for instance, we'll probably have maybe 1% to 2% of our student athletes make a professional living playing that sport in the future. Don't quote me on that necessarily, but it's an approximate, which tells us and tells the team, we have about 98%, of our student athletes right now that, are going to need everything that philanthropy provides, and our priorities within athletics to be day one ready for the Big 12 have been very clear. We need facilities that are world-class. We need new initiatives and new mental health services for our student athletes, knowing how much they go through, especially after COVID. And we need programs and sports that are fueled with resources to make the student athlete experience a positive one. So we are still anchored on that as a team. And yet we understand the urgency of the matter, and we're identifying new ways to navigate this ocean that hasn't been mapped yet. And I think the last thing I'll say on the topic is a lesson that I think I just try to remind myself of just doing the next best thing. If there's uncertainty, if there's chaos around you, if there's challenges around you, just do what's the next best thing and do it and then move on. So for us in this NIL space, that's what we're trying to do as an organization.
This might be not as direct of an NIL question, but I know you've got a point of view on just where college athletics goes in general, and sort of, let's call it the implication or the intersection of, frankly, the profitability or lack thereof of college athletics within certain categories of the landscape, and just the overall budget pressures that are being experienced by higher ed. And my understanding is there's around 350 D1 schools, 6,000 unique teams. There's around 30,000 unique teams across 1,100 or so NCAA institutions. But based on my read of our conversation last week, your point of view is there's going to be fewer teams in the future. Tell me about some of the pressures you're hearing about within your peer group and how folks are navigating that. Obviously, Cincinnati in a strong position, given the Power Five, connection, but it sounds like that is going to become more important than ever in the very near future from what you are hearing.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't want to speak for anybody out there, but again, a lot of us are trying to bring out the crystal ball and just try to make sense of where we're going. And I think it's fair to say that certain institutions throughout the country will be, and frankly, probably should be asking questions around what their core function is. What is their essential mission in their community? And I think there's going to be some institutions that say, we're here to educate. We're here to, save lives, to problem solve, to build leaders, but we're not necessarily going to be able to support collegiate athletics at the same level as we have been historically. Whether that's fueled by tough budgets or whether that's fueled by a reflection point that institution is going to have based off of the reshaping of collegiate athletics, I don't know. But I think there will be some institutions out there that choose to take a step away from collegiate athletics and to pivot toward for them what their core function is. For us at the University of Cincinnati, we feel like collegiate athletics is at the core of who we are. Certainly, we're an academic institution and a research institution that has an incredible academic medicine program. But we also think athletics is at the core of who we are. That provides community, that provides a sense of belonging, if you will, for many of our students and our community members. So we're highly invested in its success. We've had a great run over the last couple of years. Our college football playoff appearance was just incredible, and it helped to increase applications to the University of Cincinnati. And we all know when you have an influx of applications for a given school, that has been consistent over a long period of time. We've been growing exponentially over the last several years and it's pretty unique, that obviously throughout the country to see that type of growth. And I think it's fair to say athletics has been a major driver in that growth. And we're unapologetic about how important our Bearcats are and how it helps to fuel the broader mission at the University of Cincinnati and at UC Health. So, we're in a good position. As you said, we're day one ready, starting in a month. But I do think the reshaping of collegiate athletics will change the game, no pun intended, for many of our institutions and our partners throughout the country. And it just remains to be seen how drastic that change will be.
Tell me about the Next Now campaign, where you are at the foundation. Are you hiring? How can people learn more, stay in touch?
We are about a year away from a timeline perspective of ending our Next Now $2 billion comprehensive campaign. Hopefully we are one or two gifts away from meeting our goal. We're getting really close, and it's because of the incredible team that we have here at the UC Foundation and incredible donors we have in this city and throughout the country. But we are very proud about this campaign, how it has been not about the big number. It has been about the impact that our donors have made to reshape our beloved university and our beloved community. There are programs, there are facilities, there are certain initiatives that would not exist without the power of philanthropy. I just had the honor of going to the Ohio Innocence Project's annual gala and sat close to many of our exonerees, and the grace that those individuals give us to the community, gives us as a community is just so invigorating, so inspiring. And we can absolutely say without the power of philanthropy, certain individuals will still be in prison right now for something they didn't do. And that's just one example of impact that this campaign has provided. And there's many. So we're pretty proud about the impact this campaign has made. We're coming to an end, and we're thinking about the next era of philanthropy here at the University of Cincinnati. We are hiring. We have a tremendous community of colleagues here at the UC Foundation that is becoming more and more inclusive, more and more productive. I think the best culture is a winning one, and we're a winning team. We've grown our impact exponentially over the last several years, and that's only going to continue in the future. So if you want to be a part of a winning team in a great city and a great community, come to Cincinnati. It's a pretty special place.
Love it, Steve. You're a good representative. Appreciate you sharing today and for all of your perspective over the years, and would encourage everybody listening, look up Steve Rosfeld on LinkedIn, shoot him a note, let him know you heard him on the podcast, and stay in touch. You never know where it leads. Any closing thoughts, Steve? Otherwise, we'll wrap this up and kick off the week.
Well, just two points, Brent. I would say higher education has been at the forefront of change and has been at the forefront of problem solving, and we are living in a very interesting time, a time of great significance. And I think in terms of things that I'm hopeful of and optimistic about, I'm optimistic that higher education will continue to lead the way in terms of finding solutions to the problems that we have as a society. A lot of things to be hopeful for, and I think the higher education space and the advancement space is really fueling that optimistic nature that I have, and hopefully a lot of us have. And then secondly and lastly, I would just say again, thanks, Brent, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here. I'm also very passionate about professionalizing this industry, and you and your team at EverTrue have been at the forefront of that for many years. And it's a great honor to be with you today.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. And yeah, I mean, look, my understanding is the University of Cincinnati is the first institution to start a co-op program, for example, which at the time was a wildly pioneering idea over 100 years ago. And I think at the same time reflects a lot of what the markets need from higher education, that people need from higher education today, which is how do we make sure that we are solving problems, preparing people, skills development, and driving that into a productive workforce that works for society and works for the individuals. And Cincinnati's been there from the beginning, and I think we're now in this sort of next generation of reinvention, but a lot of those same principles are going to be more applicable than ever. So really appreciate your time, better understanding of your past, present, and future, and wish you nothing but the best. And so with that, I will close today's episode. Brent here signing off with Steve Rosfeld, who serves as Vice President for Development at the University of Cincinnati Foundation. Thanks, Steve, and take care, everybody.